Hello, is anybody here? You don't have to be afraid. I'm just here to talk with you. I am a seasoned paranormal investigator with a growing resume. I began investigating the paranormal when I was 16 years old, where I learned the tricks of the trade from a dear friend of mine. Since then, I've been a paranormal tour guide at the Ohio State Reformatory, have been on paranormal teams where I have investigated private homes, and have given presentations on real life ghost busting. Now, I'm on a quest to explore all realms of the paranormal through expert interviews. I'm Sydney Miller, and this is Not Afraid. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Not Afraid. Tonight we will be exploring a topic in which I know absolutely nothing about, which is what makes this podcast so fun for me. Last episode, I was relatively familiar with the history, and having investigated Brunella Cottage myself, even had some personal experiences to share. Rather than me talking you through the history of crossing over spirits, we will let our special guest talk us through. Tonight, we will be learning about the process of crossing over spirits, together with Emma Hoover. I know Emma through having worked with her dad at the Ohio State Reformatory. I've also been on a few ghost hunts at the Reformatory with Emma, but have not witnessed her crossing over a spirit, although I am very curious about her ability to do so. Welcome to I'm Not Afraid of the Afterlife, Crossing Over Spirits. Emma, thank you so much for willing to be on my podcast tonight. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Sure. So, first of all, if you would just briefly describe to me your abilities and what you call yourself. So, like, are you psychic? Are you a medium? What sort of name do you give yourself?
So I genuinely have no idea. My third eye is almost open for what it's worth. I'm kind of closing myself off because I'm not completely ready. I'm extremely intuitive. I guess I would consider myself an empath to spirits, which is like so crazy because I don't feel anything towards humans. It's just mainly spirits. So, so I don't really know exactly what I am. I'm just kind of vibing and just doing my thing. So, yeah, just very highly intuitive, and I can feel their emotions, and sometimes when they are thinking about something, it just kind of comes to me. So I don't know, something like that.
Sure, very interesting. So, by third eye, can you explain a little bit more what you mean by that?
Yeah, so I'm starting to kind of see things, like I'm seeing shadows a bit better. I can definitely hear things. I feel things. I feel their emotions a lot. Um, I'm intuitive to what they want me to feel or what they are thinking. But the main thing is that I am closing myself off from being able to see them because I'm just not ready to see stuff like that yet. So that's why I say it's like almost fully open, because it is, but not quite there yet, if
Okay.
that even makes sense at all.
Sure. Yeah, I'm following what you're saying there. So, how
Yeah.
long have you had these abilities?
I I think about a year. I haven't noticed them until last year. I do most of my ghost hunting at the reformatory, so a lot of it's been coming out while I'm ghost hunting there. And when I met a spirit named Damon, that's when my abilities kind of started coming out. Him and I developed like this special connection, and I was able to, I'll get into it later when I talk about like him and stuff, but I started to be able to feel like his emotions and stuff. So that's kind of all started from there, I guess.
So, do you think it was something that you've always had and just never opened your eyes to, or do you think it's just something that hit all of a sudden and maybe you're just because you're now more into investigating, it's just something you've learned to do?
I honestly think I've probably had it for a while. I've just closed myself off because I used to volunteer at the reformatory, and anything like a paranormal freak the heck out of me. I wanted like nothing to do with it, but I was always interested in like what my dad did and stuff. So I think I've probably always had it. And it was just very slowly developing the more that I got into investigating and stuff. And when I saw Mason the medium, she told me that I think this was back in 2019, I think. She told me I was going to be going through a spiritual transformation. So I feel like I've probably always had it, but I've been closed off from it. So, yeah.
That's very interesting. And that seems to be
Yeah.
how most people describe it. I've talked to a couple of psychics and or mediums now, and witches even, and they've all sort of said that it's something that you're pretty much born with. You have it. Some people, some of them think everybody has it, but it just takes different people hit at different times when they're open to it. Some people at 5 years old, they start to realize it. Some people are 10, some people are 20, 25, 30. It just depends.
Yeah, that's so crazy how it's different for everyone.
Yeah, and it just all of a sudden sort of hits for some reason.
Right? Because like I never even thought I would ever have any kind of abilities like this. Like I thought it was just like a select few of the population, but it's like if you think about it, maybe everyone does have it and you either believe in it or you don't. Who knows?
Yeah, agreed. And so how did you discover your abilities? How did you didn't just wake up one day and are like, oh, I could talk to ghosts, even though that's
No
how we'd
way.
like to say it works.
No, I would. Wouldn't that be so cool?
Yeah.
It's just like click. Oh my gosh, no way. How cool. So I think when I discovered Damon at the reformatory, this is when it all started like coming to light to me. But at the time, I didn't realize it because I wasn't very educated about stuff like this. I was just using my pendulum and that's it. So I was on my very first public ghost hunt, my very first ghost hunt like ever, with my friend Susan, and we were in the e-showers, and I was using my pendulum. I was like, is anybody in here today? Blah, 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 the usual introduction and stuff. And there was a yes, and it turned out to be the spirit who we found out was Damon. Her and I, to figure out his name, we went through the alphabet. We were like, does it start with A? Does it start with B? Does it start with... And he said yes to D. So we were naming off names from like that were popular in like the 1800s and 1900s. And Damon, he ended up saying yes to Damon. So I think my friend Susan came up with that. So good on her. And I could kind of sense he was a bit on the shyer side because I eventually found out from him through like yes or no questions that he doesn't come out a lot. He's very shy. And I discovered that he did not know that he was dead. So I had to be very careful around that and tiptoe it. But from the moment I met him, I felt like this kind of special connection, I guess. Like, it was like weird. I can't even describe it. But from then on, like every time I'd go back, I would check up on him, or like anytime my dad would go back, I'd be like, can you check up on Damon for me, And so when I really started to realize my ability was when I had to break the news to him that he was dead. So, when you're doing that, you kind of got to ease into it and be kind of gentle, So I was like, we're all dressed in, different clothes than you probably saw back then. And, we were asking if he had a heartbeat. And my dad was asking, have you eaten in a while? And my dad was like, did you know that you can go anywhere that you want? You can pass through walls. You can't feel any pain. And I was like, do you know where we're going to? And from there, I just got this wave of like anxiety, but it wasn't, I was like, this isn't me feeling this. I was like, this is not me. And I got super emotional immediately, and I started kind of crying a little bit. And there was like a group of people watching, so I was like under so much pressure. And I was like, it wasn't even me crying. I was like, I can't do this. And then after I said, do you know where I'm getting at? My pendulum, because I was using my pendulum replied with yes. And I just started like breaking down, like crying. But in my head, I was like, I'm not crying. This is him. And it was like the biggest pain in my chest, like that huge pain of like sadness that you feel when you hear that someone has passed away, like a loved one. And I had to walk out of the room. I was just like, oh my God, I can't believe this. I'm feeling so sad. Like, but it wasn't me. I was like, this is how he feels. Like, he's really heartbroken. And from then on, that's how I knew that I could feel spirit's emotions. So that was so overwhelming. It was like the craziest thing I've ever felt in my life.
Yeah, I can imagine how overwhelming that would be. And you bring up an interesting point there that I think we tend to overlook when we are investigating, and that not all of the spirits know that they have passed. And some of them do, and some of them are very aware of that, and then some of them don't. Some of them don't even know what year it is, and to them it is still 1880 or whatever they passed away.
Yeah, that's how it was when I met him, because we found out that he was being abused by other spirits, and he was being harassed by a spirit that was following him around. But because he thought he was still alive, he didn't know that he could just poof into anywhere in the building. So he thought that he was stuck being abused and harassed by these other spirits. And I remember when I first met him, I asked, do you have a heartbeat? And it was no. And I got emotional. I was like, oh my God, he doesn't know he's dead. He's like the sweetest thing ever. And he doesn't know. I was so sad. I was like, that's awful. So having to tell him, like, it was hard for me because, you know, I cared so much about him. And like, it's weird to care about someone you barely even know, and someone who's like not in this realm. But it was like we have such a special connection, and I just felt something different towards him. So after all of that, that's when my abilities started to come out.
And what's interesting about that is the amount of people that have been through that prison and in the e-showers and investigated with every paranormal device known to man to never, at least to my knowledge, have an experience like that, to come up with that name, to have that sort of connection. And he chooses you out of anybody who's walked through that building since it's closed.
I've been told that I'm a beacon of light to these spirits. So I guess that's why they gravitate towards me and feel comfortable around me, which I think that's kind of cool that they trust me, even they don't even know me, but they trust me, I guess.
Yeah, and what's also very interesting that you've said is that, and maybe this is why they gravitated towards you as well, is you didn't mention asking them how they died, when they died, why they were in prison, were they innocent? And I know those are the stereotypical questions that most would probably don't like to answer. And the fact that you're taking a whole different approach and asking them, getting to know them as a person, not as an inmate or not as a dead person.
Exactly. And that's what annoys me sometimes when people go like investigating, even like not even just in the reformatory, but just like different places. Like they only ask like, why were you here? Like, you know, how did you, like what you were saying. But like when I was getting to know Damon, I asked him like, what kind of music do you like? What's your favorite color? Blah, blah, blah. So, like silly stuff like that. But they're sick of hearing like the same questions all the time. Like, so when people come in and ask questions like that, it makes it easier for them to talk and open up because they're not being asked difficult and personal questions like that.
Okay, I know you have been on several paranormal investigations from time to time because we've been on a few together. So how
Hmm.
frequently do you go ghost hunting?
I wish I could go like so often. I would go like literally every week if I could. Like, wouldn't that be awesome?
Yeah, me too.
Um, yeah, I'm part of a paranormal investigation group called Parallel Planes with her name's Lori. I can't remember her last name, but she's like this sweetest, coolest person. So she hosts she will host ghost hunts like everywhere. She will coordinate, and we ended up going to Gettysburg. So if there's something that interests me, like I'll go, but I don't go as often as I would like just because like I'm just so busy and work sucks. But I try to go like, a couple times a year if I can.
So do you typically encounter spirits to cross over during an investigation, or do you encounter them everywhere, every day? It doesn't matter.
Yeah, so both. So I've encountered spirits who need to be crossed over while investigating, and I have also encountered spirits at literally my own apartment or during my training at with Parallel Planes at Lori's house. My dad crossed them over in Gettysburg. They did a crossing over in a field, but I didn't participate because I was tired as heck and I knew it would suck out the energy of me. So yeah, it could probably be literally anywhere.
So
It's
how do
crazy.
you said you've been blocking it out to some extent. How do you turn off your abilities?
That is actually something that I need to look into because I never really turn it off. But when I get super overwhelmed, so for example, like sometimes if I'm in the attic, you know how crazy it gets in there.
Yeah.
If the energy gets super overwhelming to me, I step out and take a breather. So I at least know my limits. But I know that I can be like, hey, like, please don't, use my energy. Please don't, I'm not feeling too well right now, or I don't have enough energy right now. So if you could like not right now, if you know what I mean. And
Yeah.
normally that works. So I guess maybe that's how I turn it off for a bit. But other than that, it's just, I don't know.
It's interesting because I've heard other people talk about, being able to, turn it off. Or every room they walk into, there'll be like 5,000 spirits trying to get their attention, and it takes a lot of
Oh my
energy,
God.
and so on and so
Yeah.
forth. So I'm always interested to know how that works because I mean, yeah, it's cool, but it's impossible to live with when you're in situations like
Hmm.
that, and it's like they always need your attention, and you're trying to work, or you're trying to drive, or you're trying to do something maybe really tedious or something that's dangerous, and you have to be
Hmm.
focused.
Yeah. I think that's probably what it is for me. Like if I'm focused on like communicating and like trying to find these spirits, then that's when it turns on. But if I'm just living like my normal, like mundane life, doing like, work or like laundry or something, that's when it's kind of shut off.
Interesting.
So that's what I've kind of noticed.
Sure.
But yeah.
And so you touched on this a little bit, but maybe in a little bit more detail. How do you communicate with spirits, or how do they communicate with you? Like through visions? Do they talk to you? Do you physically hear them? Do you see them? Is it through feelings? Is it through emotions?
So what's really cool is at first it was just through my pendulum. That's when I was kind of learning. And then you know how my dad is, all you need is your ears and your sight. So
He's gonna hear
I
this later, by
don't,
the way.
I know. So I try to listen. I don't really hear them a lot, unfortunately. Usually I hear like knocks and like, like footsteps, but I don't hear like voices. I don't hear whispers and stuff like that. I rarely hear voices. I was half asleep, falling asleep in my bedroom one night, light on, phone was like on a random app, and all of a sudden I just heard an Emma. And I was like, hello. So very rarely I'll hear a voice. I can sometimes feel a touch. Um, I can communicate like intuition. So if they have something that they need to tell me, it'll just sometimes come to my mind, or their emotion will come to me intuitively. So I'll be like, oh, they're feeling a little mad right now, or they're feeling a little standoff, you know? So what else? I use my pendulum a lot. I just got a ghost box, so I've kind of played with that a little bit. That's really cool. Kind of hard to use because it's usually hit or miss, but I don't rely on it, obviously. So yeah, lots of intuition, lots of emotion, all that cool stuff.
So it's more like an internal rather than an external thing. Like you're not actually, somebody's not actually whispering in your ear, but you get something in your head that says, oh, they'd like me to leave now.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's the best way to describe it.
That's kind of how I always figured. This is for people who are empaths or similar. But because I'm not, I've never really understood when somebody's like, oh, they want you to leave now. Like, how do you know that? Did they tell you that? Do you feel that? Are they literally standing in front of you, shoving you out the door?
Right. Yeah, for me, so I feel like a lot of people describe it like this. So gut intuition. So I feel it more in like my chest area and like in my heart. And sometimes in my mind it comes to me and it's just like, oh, like a light bulb. It'll just be like, oh, they're feeling that, oh, they want you to know this, blah blah blah. So it's definitely like a feeling, and it just comes to my head like that.
So I guess in some ways we've probably all experienced that on some level. When you enter a room and you like, nope, I shouldn't be here. I need to turn around. Or when you get goosebumps in an area and you're like, you know what, maybe I should leave and come back later. Is that sort of a similar experience?
Yeah, sometimes if I'm aware like that, like my mom's like that too sometimes, and she doesn't even realize it because she's not really into all this stuff. But when we were at Prospect Place in Trinway, Ohio, we walked down into like the cellar basement, and right when she stepped in, she's like, nope, I got to get out of here. This is giving me the worst feeling ever. Yeah, she's not into it at all, but it's kind of like that. And sometimes people don't realize that's kind of like a spiritual thing.
Yeah.
If they're not really into it. And sometimes I do definitely feel that. I'm like, that's how I feel whenever I go into solitary. I get the absolute worst feeling in there. So I'm just like, nope, I'm out of here.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you've mentioned this a little bit too, that you use your pendulum a lot. However, are there any other tools that you use to communicate with?
I have used dowsing rods before. I think dowsing rods are really cool. But other than that, it's usually just my senses, my pendulum, and yeah, that's it.
That's interesting because if I was gonna guess, for somebody who is an empath and feels, I would have said pendulum and dowsing rods because those seem to be more, they operate more with like you, like I don't know how to describe it exactly, but it's more based on your energy rather than like a K2 meter or a laser grid or something is operating on its own. It's operating on a battery. And it's got its own energy and it's emitting its own lights or sounds or whatever. And it's sort of external. But the other two things don't require a battery and they only work if you're holding them. And they only work for certain people. Some work better for people than others do. And it's sort of more attached to you personally. So, I mean, that makes sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I prefer using my pendulum, because it's that special connection you have with it. And like my friends have tried to use my pendulum and I'm like, good luck. And they don't answer because I'm like, it answers to me, you know?
Right. Interesting. So how do you determine which spirits to cross over and which spirits to leave alone?
So normally when like my dad and I have crossed over spirits, we normally ask, are there, you introduce yourself, say, are there any spirits with us today? And we ask, like, are there any spirits that need help? And normally the ones that need help are the ones that are looking to get the heck out and, be crossed over, go to the next, whatever is next. So normally the people who want to be crossed over will come to you and make themselves known, which is like what I've noticed personally. Whereas if they're not ready, like when I told Damon that he was dead, my dad was explaining to him, like, crossing over, going to the light and stuff, like, you won't have to be here. And he wasn't ready at the time. So we didn't, we left him alone, waited until he was ready.
Interesting. So I don't even know what to make of that. It's just,
I know,
it's
so weird.
Yeah, it would be
it's so interesting and weird.
It would be a forever, like a never-ending process if every single spirit that you walked into a room, or that were in the showers needed that help. But basically, would you ever like deny a spirit if it came to you and said, I need help? Would you ever say no?
I'm too nice, so I don't know. It depends. It actually depends on like where I am.
Okay.
So if I'm like somewhere in public, then I'm like, I can do this at a different time. Sometimes, like when my dad and I were at Prospect Place, we've had spirits come to us asking for help, but we're like, no, we can't do this right now. It's against the policy because there's some, there are some places that don't allow crossovers, like the reformatory doesn't. I think Prospect Place doesn't. So if we are there, we got to respect the rules. So we tell them, if you come to us at this time on this day, then we can cross you over. So yeah, that's the only time I really deny. But other than that, I try to help if I can when they ask.
So now walk me through the process of crossing over a spirit, because I've never seen it done.
All right.
And you sort of alluded to it, but just like take me through the steps. So a spirit approaches you and they need help and you're choosing like, hey, I'm allowed to do this, I'm willing to do this, I'm ready. What would be your next steps?
So for this process, I use a pendulum. I've only ever used it with a pendulum, so I don't know if there's another way that people do it, but my dad and I use our pendulum. So we basically ask them to call to a loved one who has already passed away. And basically calling to the loved one helps them with extra energy to get over and to ensure that they have someone to help them to get to the right place that they're supposed to be getting to. So we say, do you have your loved one ready? Are they here for you? And when they say yes, that's when we begin the process. So if we have a group of people, we usually stand in a circle to kind of, I guess, create like this like energy circle is what it kind of feels like to me.
Okay.
And so we have one person holding the pendulum. So for example, if it was me, I'd be holding the pendulum. I'm like looking off my notes here right now.
That's okay.
So we refer to it as the light because we don't exactly know what the next step is. At least for me, my dad might know, but for me, we just refer to it as the light. So we say, okay, now start calling to your loved ones, start going to them, use their energy, use as much energy as you need. So we basically kind of just, help them get there, keep reassuring them, keep saying, hold on to your loved one, keep going there, stuff like that. Go to the light. And while that, like the energy just like builds up, it's like the craziest feeling ever. And you can feel them, start to go to whatever this next place is. And while the pendulum is constantly rapidly going back and forth in the yes direction. And sometimes if we feel like there's not enough energy being built up, we say, okay, if you need to use our energy, you can. But normally my dad does that because you know how my dad is. He's just so nice like that. And then once the pendulum starts to slow down, that means that they have crossed over, they have reached the light, and the room just kind of completely calms down. It's a very peaceful and like very happy feeling. And it's just like, it feels like all is calm, like kind of like the storm is over. There's a rainbow, like happiness, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so after that, we always call the spirit back and ask the pendulum to confirm if they have crossed over. And normally it's a yes. So that is the process.
Interesting. So
Yeah.
to know that it has actually been successful, you feel a difference in the room, sort of like some sort of relief or a lightness.
Yeah.
You don't physically see anything, but you feel it.
Yeah.
And then you confirm that with the pendulum or whatever else somebody would be using.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such an overwhelming process, especially if there's like a group of spirits being crossed over. Because I've done that by myself and it is crazy.
Yeah.
It is ridiculous, but it is like, it's a very it's kind of a rewarding feeling, at least to me, because I know I've helped them and they don't have to suffer anymore, and they've made peace here. They've done what they needed to do. That's what my dad refers it as. So I'm glad to help them move on.
So at that point, can they still come back, and if you were to go to the e-showers 5 weeks later, and would you still be able to communicate with them, or at that point are they no longer in that same realm of being able to communicate and they're just gone?
They can come back and forth from
Okay.
what my dad has told me, and I believe in that because I crossed over Damon, and I thought because of, you know, what he's been through and stuff, I thought he would want to stay in that realm, but he came back, and he's now one of my spirit guides. So he hangs around with me like 24/7. And we've known spirits who we've crossed over that have stayed in the realm, and we've never heard from them again. So I think it's just a preference to what they want. But I think it's cool that they can come back and forth.
Yeah, it's interesting. So do you typically do this process from home or on location or both?
I normally do it at home, or just like outside in like a field or something, just because like I said, a lot of haunted locations have policies not to do crossing overs.
Right.
So that's why I tell them, like, I can cross you over on this day at this place. If you come to me, I will be here ready. So I've done it. Oh my gosh, this is like the most wild story ever. So I was at home by myself, and I'm just, you know, living my life, doing mundane things, and all of a sudden I noticed this thing on my arm, and the best way to describe it is it looked like a burn, or like somebody had branded me. So I was like, huh, I have no idea what I did. I didn't feel anything. I had no pain, so I had no idea it was there. So after I cleaned it off, I was looking at it and I noticed it looked like a bee. So I tell my dad all this, and I'm like, can you help me figure out who the heck this was? Because I knew right then and there that I didn't do this. I knew that it had to be a spirit. So I asked my dad, I was like, can you help me figure out who this was? So it turned out it was Mr. B from the attic in the reformatory trying to get my attention. And I'm like, well, first of all, there are better ways to get my attention, sir. But okay, I guess you chose that route. And my dad figured out that he had a bunch of spirits from the reformatory that wanted to be crossed over, and they didn't want to wait. I was like, okay, all right, he brought them here. So they were all already in my house.
Right.
Waiting to be crossed over. So I was like, okay, all right, I'll do it. So I got my pendulum out. I told them all, like, call to a loved one, use your energy, go to the light, you know, that process. My pendulum was going crazy because the amount of energy, like it was like swinging like crazy. It was like the craziest I've ever seen it. And the energy was so overwhelming because there were so many spirits at once. And, you know, I can't step out because I'm already in too deep. So I'm like, all right, let's go. Like, I got this. And after it was completed, I was like, oh, okay, so much relief, so much better. And I asked Mr. B, I was like, is there anybody else I missed? Was there anybody else that needed help? And no, I got everyone that needed it. And I was like, Mr. B, if you need my attention, please do not do anything physical ever again. Because sometimes you got to set boundaries with these spirits because sometimes they don't know any better and they don't know the best way to get your attention. So I was like, you can't do that, sir.
Sure.
So I did that in my living room on an afternoon. And it was crazy, but like I said, I was glad to be able to help. And that's when my dad told me that Mr. B found me because I am a beacon of light. And he followed that light and led him to me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
To clarify, you invite them to come meet you at a place and time. How do you think, this might be a really bizarre question, how do you think they get to that point? Are they like hitchhiking in your dad's vehicle and coming home? Are they
They've done that
attaching
before. They've done that before.
Yeah, me too. Are they attaching themselves to you, or are they just like walking and they're just like, you know what? This is the address you gave me, and it's 2:00.
Right. So I think I think my dad has said that, like, because he's asked these kinds of questions to them before to kind of understand like their abilities as spiritual beings. So I think what he told me is that they can think of a place and they'll be there. And like when they want to show themselves to us, they can think of a way that they want to show us. So like if they want to be a shadow, they just think, shadow, here I am. So that's how I think. I know that they do attach themselves to you sometimes. Damon attached himself to me, but I don't mind because I trust him. But some spirits have rode in cars, I guess, according to my dad. But yeah, I guess they can choose where they want to go and they'll just be there.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. It's crazy.
So, do you have a website or any contact information for anybody who might be interested in asking you any questions or anything that you're talking about, or maybe, you know, they're dealing with a similar thing and you might be able to help them figure out how to wrangle their abilities or anything along those lines? What
Yeah.
should you tell people if they want to learn more?
I can give them like my email to start because I'm not really, I don't have a website. That'd be cool, honestly. I can give them my email. That'd probably be the best way because
Okay.
I'm bad at replying to like DMs and stuff on like Instagram and Twitter.
Okay, and then is there anything else you would like to share that we have not talked about tonight?
You know, just be respectful of these spirits, you know, like they don't want to be crossed over, don't pressure them. If you're not really, I would say, like, I would prefer if people who knew what they were doing did crossovers, because I see a lot of like beginner paranormal investigators and ghost hunters going in and just doing stupid stuff, and it just like bothers the heck out of me when I see them being so disrespectful. And like, so just like if you're serious about it, take it seriously, you know. And if you witness a crossing over, it's like one of the coolest and bittersweet experiences ever.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for agreeing to sit down and join me again. It was very fascinating. I learned a lot, something that
I'm so glad.
Maybe one of the topics I've covered most that I've known the least about. And yeah, I didn't even attempt to do research on it because I didn't know where to start. It's not something that has a very clear like start and stop history, like witchcraft and
Right.
some of the other things we've covered. It's just
Mhm.
sort of a very different topic to approach, but I think you
Mhm.
really laid that out for us. So thank you very
Oh,
much.
I'm so glad because sometimes I'm not good at explaining things. So I'm really glad to be here and share some of my experience because I've never really like talked about it publicly before. So it was really cool to be able to share my experience to like-minded people.
Yeah, great. So this will come out either at the end of October or the beginning of November. I have one episode before this that is going to come out at the end of the month. So look for it.
Cool.
And then, like I said, I'll tag you on Facebook, and then it will be available on the video version on YouTube, and then all the audio
Mhm.
on Anchor, Spotify, and everywhere else where this podcast goes out to.
Cool. Awesome. I'll be looking forward to it.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Thanks again for having me. It was so much fun.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to rate and review us on your favorite streaming service. I'm Sydney Miller, and this was Not Afraid.